Hi, Wes. How are you?
Very good. Hopefully your day's going well.
It's going all right. How's your day going?
It's good. We had sun last like 4 days in Seattle in March, so it was a blessing. Now it's cloudy for the next, 2 or 3 months.
That's awesome. Tesla is up 2%. Stock markets are up about 0.5% to 1%. The Fed press conference is going on still. The yield curve has steepened a little bit. 2-year Treasury yield is down about 10 basis points, and the 30-year is up a couple of basis points. Wes?
Oh, I didn't have a question. Sorry. I should be muted.
Oil prices are down 2%. I see Omar is here too. Wes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Coming through fine.
Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Looks like the rollout of 12.3 has been a big success. Great to see it rolling out to everybody. Kind of disappointing to see Tesla starting to climb a little bit. I was wanting to buy more shares at the 160 level, but maybe we'll get a chance around earnings or something. But between, the Fed saying they're still expecting 3 rate cuts this year, which a lot of people have been worried about them sort of pushing back. And, they're starting to increase the prices, which I think a lot of people didn't really expect. And then you've got this launch of FSD 12. There's probably a few different constituents who are buying the stock right now.
About Tesla, welcome. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. What's the latest on the rollout?
Well, we had we had this big wave yesterday. So I posted we are up to about 100,000 cars now with the new version. Does mean that all of them have FSD enabled, but I assume most of them would. So it's pretty big number. So it's like a quarter of the FSD beta test population.
Yeah, that's really good. So they're getting a lot of data. This is obviously the wide release that everyone has been waiting for. And I think Elon also commented about 11.3.1 coming soon, right, Omar?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think he mentioned something around it's not going to drive as hesitantly. So maybe they just need some more data to kind of verify the update, be more comfortable around certain error bars, and they'll let it loose next update, maybe this weekend. About Tesla, what do you think? When do you think the 12.3.1 is going to come?
Well, he said that it might be coming this weekend, so which tells me it's probably not going to be like a complete new training done from scratch. It probably will be just fine tuning of what they have. So maybe they will just adjust a few parameters. I'm not even sure they will change the model in any way. Maybe just have some overriding code. Like one of the issues is pretty common that, as I understand, and Omar may know that better, is like the speed is not. It's sometimes it's not going up to the speed limit, it just goes a little bit slower. So that's something that they probably can adjust just in the code instead of retraining anything, correct?
Well, this is supposed to be end to end, right? I mean, there's no hard coded,
Oh, I'm sure
right?
there are still some rules that are still coded. I mean, it's mostly end to end, but I'm sure they still have a few things that they can adjust on top of it if need to.
Wes, what do you think about that?
Sorry, he broke up for me. I didn't know if that happened for anybody else, so I only heard like a few words.
So about Tesla is saying that there seems to be some concern around, driving up to the speed limit in time, adjusting speed, and about Tesla suggesting that maybe Tesla can adjust the hard-coded portion of the software to fix that quickly. Do you think that's the way they would go about it, or do you think they're gonna have to kind of retrain the model?
Gotcha. I would think a partial retraining. I would think that they would optimize more or reweight or give a higher reward, for driving the speed limit in certain conditions, so they could play with some amount of weights. I really hope there's very, very few policies that are still left in the code. In other words, hard coding, that at least that type of hard coding. I think they're largely moving away from that. And I think that's one of the things that they're doing with these releases is that they continue to remove or deprioritize or deweight or make less of that code being the thing that the car actuates on, so as to give the nets more leeway to do what they need to do. That type of thing.
Yeah, partial retraining sounds like a good compromise, right?
Yeah, I would
Right. You
assume in
can
this large. Sorry, just real quick. I would assume in this large foundation model that they could probably built in to the architecture.
Omar?
Yeah, as about Tesla suggested, sometimes when you have a model and you want to adjust its behavior slightly, you can just fine tune the model. So fine tuning is a lot simpler and less computationally intensive than doing a full retrain of the model. So I suspect that's probably what they're doing for 12.3.1, just fine tuning it to eliminate some of these annoyances. And it seems like the auto speed seems to be very good in some cases, but also presenting challenges at other times for people. So for me, 12.1, it was great, but maybe a little overconfident at times, but very fluid, very smooth. Then in 12.2, I saw it become very slow and grandma like, driving below the speed limit. And that was very frustrating to me. So these people who are having problems with the auto speed, they're actually not
Can you guys hear me?
realizing. Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear everybody.
I can hear as well.
Yeah, so the people who are having issues with auto speed, I think they're probably not realizing how good V12 actually is. And then in V12.3, it was having some issues being slow for some other people, not for me, but some other people were reporting the issue. And someone actually told me, oh, in 12.2, it was working great, but in 12.3, it's not working well. So it sounds like some people are definitely seeing the slowness. Like I've seen some comments like, why is it driving below the speed limit? And it's like, okay, well, it's not doing that for everybody, but certain people seem to be having some issues with it. So hopefully 12.3.1 this weekend can address that.
Any questions on V12.3? Please request to speak. Omar, what do you think of the Fed's action today?
I mean, I thought it was expected, you know, no real surprises there, which is what if the Fed is doing their job, you shouldn't really be surprised by anything. A lot of people had been worried that CPI and PPI weren't continuing to fall too much, but the Fed isn't one to just sort of change the course of monetary policy that quickly based on a few data points. I think they're generally seeing things trend in the right direction. They don't need to see us hit the 2% target to be able to start bringing down rates. They just kind of need to see it heading in the right direction. And I think they feel confident about that. There may be fewer rate cuts in 24, 25, they were saying, but generally, I think this is very positive. This is very good for Tesla, especially. Everything kind of changes for Tesla when the rates come down. You have obviously easier credit availability, easier to get a car loan, lower interest rate on that car loan, meaning you can afford more car. You can afford to spend more on a car and still get your loan approved. And then, of course, obviously, the effect on the equity markets from equities becoming a better investment relative to bonds or other securities, I think will be beneficial as well. So this is almost the most important thing for Tesla and Tesla stock, even maybe more important than FSD V12 is the rates coming down. And we still got 3 rate cuts this year. That's going to be phenomenal. People are going to say, okay, rates are headed in the right direction now, as opposed to in a more restrictive direction. So that's really great to hear.
All right. When machine is done with the toilet, I come up about that. Not what's your question?
With 12.3.1, it's safe to say that V12 rollout is paused. And then B, when it comes out, do you think they'll use the same like waves and whoever was on wave 1, 2, 3, 4? Will that kind of be the same, or it's always random and always different?
I mean, there's no such thing as a pause, really, right? It's like people say this a lot, but they kind of send it out or they don't send it out. You could have lunch and then you can have dinner. Was it a pause in between? I mean, maybe you could call it that, but if you saw a snack, you're not opposed to eating some. So I don't think we really have to sort of hyper-analyze the rollout. It seems to be progressing well. There don't seem to be any showstoppers. I wouldn't be surprised to see 12.3 continue to roll out in advance of 12.3.1. Elon said it's to fix some minor annoyances, not any serious bugs. So it may or may not roll out. But we'll find out.
Copy that. Thanks.
Machine, what do you think of the Fed action?
I thought it was pretty straightforward. I don't think there was many surprises.
Are you on the toilet?
No, not anymore.
That was like 20 minutes though, from the first time you replied.
That doesn't mean I was on there that long. It's a normal.
Is that Popeyes
Body.
going through, or?
Well, I did eat Popeyes, but I don't think it came out that quickly. That would be a record. That would be hyper exponential transit time, which I don't think I'm breaking any records. Anyways, it's disgusting. I don't know why you bring that up. Your listeners don't want to hear that. In terms of
I heard it drives up engagements when you start making pee jokes and poop jokes. Apparently, it drives engagements.
Well, it's because
drives up ratings.
Everyone's here is very immature. I am the only.
I heard advertisers pay more on YouTube for those kind of content.
It's because all the YouTube watchers are all like 15-year-old boys. But yeah, the inflation meeting, CPI meeting, everything fine. I don't. They're sticking with their proper rhetoric, saying we're evidence based. They're going to see how things go. They're still targeting 3 rate cuts. I keep in mind those rate cuts. I think they're targeting 0.25% for each. So by the end of the year, maybe bringing down the Fed funds rate to 4.5%. I forget what the range is exactly. So I mean that'll help Tesla, but not that much. It's going to add a little bit of purchasing power for people. I mean, maybe they can increase ASPs up to like $1,000. So that's definitely going to be helpful by the end of the year. I don't think we're going to see much effect of that on demand in this first part of the year, not until third quarter perhaps, and it'll be slight, right? When you have the first rate cut of 0.25, like that's not going to make a big difference for Tesla. So most of the effects going to be seen in 2025 in terms of on the earnings reports, in my opinion. So I think it is a good thing, but then the near term there's still going to be questions about demand and pricing. Tesla's been coming out with these announcements of raising prices, but they're doing it ahead of time, which is a bit suspicious. If you had huge order rates right now, you would just raise the prices right away. If you didn't, then that's kind of not good for your shareholders because you're missing out on that additional profit. So it's to be seen how exactly it's going to play out in Q2. My guess is right now it's mostly to pull forward a bit of demand.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. I was thinking the same exact thing yesterday. I think that if they're announcing it, it's probably because they're trying to play some psychology games rather than. But there's also the fact that obviously, Troy has been pounding the table about multiple production at 3 months. So there's that. But Model Y, there's ample inventory, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's mostly a psychology game. That doesn't mean I disagree with the strategy. I think I do agree with it. I think the drastic amount of price cuts they took, while it first makes sense, at some point you want to see if there's a little bit more fine-tuned approaches you can do. Instead of cutting the list price for everyone, like there's a distribution of people and what they're willing to pay for the car. And you want to try to grab all those people at the different prices they're willing to pay. And ways to do that might be keep the list price higher and then offer incentives or inventory cuts for people who are willing to look further. But meanwhile, the person who's the rich rapper in LA who's drunk is like, I'm going to order a Tesla, and he just goes on there and just quickly hits order at whatever the list price is. Like you want to grab that higher price, not automatically have it low for everyone. So I agree with the strategy, and it doesn't mean though that demand is higher right now.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I missed the last part of what you said, but I generally agree with what Machine is saying. Machine, what's your thoughts on 12.3 feedback that's coming in very positive?
I think it's very exciting that this thing is almost feature complete, and it seems like we don't have real data yet, but it seems like even the critical disengagement rate is probably lower than it has
Oh,
been
wow.
historically.
I thought you told me the other day that it wouldn't be lower without having driven it.
God, this guy's so rude. What I said was based on the evidence a few days ago, there was much less people who had it. And it was mostly you. And you
Hey, let's
even
go for a
basically
drive.
said,
Let's go for a drive
yeah,
tonight.
maybe. My wife's gonna be, if it's at night, she's gonna be like, where are you going? I'm like, yeah, I got this guy. He's gonna give me a drive on FSD. She'd be like, is that the weirdo that you went with a few years ago? I'm like, yeah, that guy. But yeah, maybe. What was I gonna say? Yeah. So you were kind of like saying, oh, it's improved a lot, but in terms, there were still some critical disengagements. So I'm focused on critical disengagements because those are the key criteria that ultimately are going to lead to when this thing is going to be good enough for robotaxi. And I'm guessing though from all these other comments or people's comments online, Tesla Motors Club forum, everyone's happier with it. There's still a bunch of critical disengagements, but I get the feeling that it's better. Now, better is not quantitative enough for a real assessment. So I'm just giving that out there. I think it's better. That doesn't mean it's 10x the better. I don't think that's happened based on the evidence. I think maybe it's reduced critical disengagements by like half or a third, or excuse me, reduced 2/3 or something like that right now.
I mean, it's more complicated than that. I mean, it
So
still
just 1 second,
has.
Omar, 1 second. Did you say critical disengagements reduced by 2/3? What evidence do you have for that?
No, I don't. I'm just reading what people are saying, and I'm making a guess.
Okay,
Like you don't
Omar?
think? Yeah.
I mean, it actually
Sorry,
has.
sorry, Omar, just one more thing. Sorry, you don't think what, Nishi? Finish that sentence, please.
I mean, do you think critical disengagements are lower than before?
I don't jump to conclusions. I look at data.
Well, and I prefer to use data too. So that's what I'm saying. I'm just kind of
I don't
throwing
know.
a
You
little.
kind of said 2/3. You said 2/3.
That's specific. You know, I like.
That's very specific. I mean, I can't say better, like it's better, but it's
Yeah.
not scientific enough,
It's not.
to
I
make a
agree.
conclusion.
I'm not making a conclusion. I'm just kind of throwing a number out there,
You
and I'm
said
saying
2/3.
it's a guess. Okay,
All right, Omar.
value analyst.
Again, this guy has a Tesla. He could actually run this software, but he chooses not to, and then he just makes up numbers. So it does have more safety critical interventions than V11. And for me, my V11 was very polished. People in other parts of the country may have had more critical safety interventions, but for me, it has a little more just because it's got some rough edges. It's new. So, for example, yesterday I was driving on the highway. There was some kind of weird trailer being towed by a truck. And on the highway portion, which is the old stack, it worked fine. It kept its distance. But then getting off onto the city streets, it felt like it was approaching that trailer or getting too close to it too fast. So I had to disengage. So little things like that. Now, these aren't things that the new architecture cannot handle. They're just things that require a little more training, but should be fairly obvious to solve. Just show it more weird trailers or whatever. But the architecture itself is just so much smoother. It doesn't do any weird jerky maneuvers. It makes people more comfortable. It is capable of perfect drives at times. And I've seen multiple people say this, like, it just did the drive perfectly. So there are still more rough edges, yet I would say, you know, maybe even a slim majority of my drives, let's call it like 51%, are just completely intervention free. No speed adjustment, no accelerator pedal, nothing. So you're seeing a much higher percentage of absolutely intervention free drives, but you're also still seeing a few rough edges. So my expectation is that with 12.31, 12.4, 12.5, we'll see it leapfrog V11 in every aspect, including those sort of rough edges from being new. And it'll just be, unequivocally much better performance.
Okay.
Last night I had a critical disengagement to make sure Omar's mom didn't get pregnant.
No,
So I think beyond disengagements, it's also like how comfortable is it to use and turn on? There are a lot of times where I won't even turn it on because I got to get to work. So as the disengagements go down, there's also this new thing of how enjoyable is it and how does it know your area?
Yeah, comfort is really the bottom line. And, if someone's not comfortable, they're also just way more likely to intervene as well. I mean, it's funny. I took my Cybertruck to the service center today because the ventilated seat on the front seat was having some issue. So they gave me a 2020 Tesla Model 3 loaner. And first of all, these 2020 Teslas, even with the piano black, they're still such good cars. It was so much fun to drive. It had FSD beta on it, but it had FSD beta 11. So I'm driving back home from Berkeley to San Francisco. On the highway, it's doing great. I'm thinking, wow, even FSD 11 is pretty good. Then I get back onto the city streets of San Francisco and I remember what a train wreck V11 is. It's just like stopping at the stop sign. There's a guy behind me waiting for me to go. It's just stopping and waiting. And then it starts going like 2 miles an hour. I'm like pushing the accelerator pedal. Then we're going up the hill. There's like this car going really slowly. So then it tries to go around that car, but then there's another car oncoming towards it. So then I'm disengaging. I'm like, wow, V11 really sucked ass. Like at the time, it was the best thing we'd ever seen. But after V12, it's just like, man, this thing just is a train wreck compared to the end-to-end approach.
Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. Hey, Michelle, did you watch a recent interview of hold on one second. Did you watch the interview of Gavin Baker with Antonio Gracias?
No.
The panel discussion about a month ago. They're interviewed by, what's the other guy's name? Bill Gurley. And in that interview, Gavin Baker says, in order to reduce the error rate by half, so any sort of AI inference, like assume for FSD, assume zero. Your goal is zero mistakes, right? And let's say you miss, it's 95% accurate. To get from 95% to on the so to have the error rate, so 97.5%, you have to increase compute by 10x. Do you agree with that? Compute and data by 10x.
Are you talking about inference or training?
Well, training compute. So in order to improve inference performance, if we define improvement as having the error rate, you have to increase training compute and data by 10 times.
I'm not. It depends on the model. I have to look back at those scaling papers. They were obviously on log scale.
Where's that paper guy? Like, where's that paper guy
No.
when you need?
I have to look back at it, but it's on log scale in terms of the accuracy, the log loss improvement or decrement versus the number of parameters and training time going up at like an order of magnitude. So I could see an order of magnitude increase in those causing only what would seem like, I thought it was still like an order of magnitude improvement in error drop. So I would think it's a bit better than what they're saying, but yeah, I don't have a strong opinion, and that's going to be model specific. So I don't know exactly, but I think it is something where you're definitely going to have to put in a lot more to eke out each additional level of improvement.
Well, a lot more can mean a lot of different things, obviously, right? It can mean twice as much, etc. But if what he's saying is correct, and we're currently at 1.9,
Yeah.
or 2.9s, maybe in certain areas, to get to 5.6.9s, you're looking at 100,000 to 1,000,000 times improvement in compute power, training compute and data. Is that your kind of ballpark estimate too?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It's my estimate and concern that it's going to take a lot of improvement in model compression and also probably still require higher memory and compute on the inference side to get a model that is going to work to the reliability that's needed. That's definitely a concern of mine. It's not, I haven't quantified and made a guess for exactly how much is going to be needed. That's changing over time. People thought 4 years ago that the level needed to do even what Tesla's doing now was much higher. They didn't think they'd be able to do the sort of occupancy network like work of creating a depth map from just raw camera images. That the compute to do that would be astronomical, the order of the size of the human brain. And these advances that have happened with transformers and improving the training method and inference have brought those down a lot. So it's hard to put together those trajectories of improving models, improving efficiency of training, and also being able to train more efficient inference models. How much those will bring things down, with also the requiring the trajectory of we need much better performing models. And yeah, I don't know where that intersects right now, but I am concerned. Yeah, I'm concerned that it's not going to get there with the current hardware.
Omar, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't think this is like a hard and fast law, um, where you just 10x the compute and then the error goes in half. I think he's kind of oversimplifying it a little bit. Generally, more compute and data does help, obviously. It makes the models better. So the compute is increasing, right? You see NVIDIA, they just put out their new Blackwell chips, right? They're saying that for some use cases, it has, 4 times the performance. Other use cases, probably less than that. But it's essentially kind of like two chips connected to each other. So twice as large. So the chips keep getting better and we keep adding more chips. So we keep adding more and the ones that we add keep getting better. And of course we keep gathering more data from the fleet as we go on, especially data of the challenging cases that the existing models didn't handle well. And so compute is naturally increasing quite a bit. If you have less compute, then it just takes longer for the model to train. So your iteration time is just going to be longer. But I don't think there's any reason you couldn't sort of just train the same model. So, in short, it's a little bit of an oversimplification, but yes, you can reduce the error by adding a ton of compute and adding a ton of data. And that's essentially what the strategy is.
Actually,
But I think it is true if you assume the model, which is assumption, of course, it could be wrong, just as an idea. If the current model is using most of the compute on hardware 3, that and it has a certain accuracy, that yes, you can keep retraining the model, training it further with the same number of parameters and just longer training time. You're going to eke out accuracy improvements, but at some point they're going to tail off. And then in order to improve the accuracy further, you have to add more parameters, make the model bigger. And as you do that, and this is what they're saying, that means your inference model is going to have to be bigger. And at some point, it's going to be too big for hardware 3. And then you could argue, well, if we just do a better training job on the distillation to make the efficient model, we can also make that more efficient and then reduce the size again. But at some point, those are going to hit limits. And You just need to have a bit more inference compute. So I that's obvious. This is a very obvious thing that happens, and you can't just assume. I've said this for years. You can't just assume hardware 3 or hardware 4 has enough compute to do the model at the level of fidelity needed. It might, but we don't know that for sure, and Tesla's not going to tell us. So it's to be seen.
Well, you might know if you actually upgraded from hardware 2.5 to hardware 3, because we got hardware 3 on, I mean, sorry, version 12 on my dad's version, a hardware 3 car, and it runs just the same on hardware 3 as hardware 4 practically. I mean, obviously there's some differences in the camera, but I couldn't really notice any difference in the driving characteristics, to be honest. It felt pretty much exactly the same. So I don't even think the comment that Yaman was mentioning is talking about inference compute at all. I think they're just talking about training compute. In terms of inference compute, the model isn't even as big as it could be, because right now they have a lot of workloads. They have like the legacy stack, they have other sort of triggers and stuff that they're running. They haven't 100% maximized all the compute they have on the current model. So hardware 3 and hardware 4 still have some significant leg room, and contrary to actually, running out of performance, they've actually reduced the overhead with V12. That's kind of the crazy thing. They got it to drive better while also using less resources. And I think also just not doing a round trip between the CPU and the GPU and just doing it all on the inference computer, it's also made it respond much faster. There could be other innovations in the future that allow us to do more with a smaller model. Generally, we found, for example, like in LLMs, obviously the larger models perform better, but you can just sort of train it for longer, train a smaller version of the model that's easier to deploy on mobile. And that's kind of what we're going to have to do to some extent. We're not going to have, infinite levels of inference compute in the car. The level of inference compute I think we have is going to increase, but it's going to be whatever is reasonable to put in a car at the time at a reasonable cost. So you just sort of work within the profile you have. You train the best model you have that fits within the resource profile of the car. And if it gets to a point where you realize that you actually need more compute power than hardware 3 has, for example, then you could simply develop a hardware 5 board or something like that fit within the resource profile of the hardware 3 car and retrofit those cars. If it's really the difference between, $30,000 of income a year and not, then it's easy to justify, even a $10,000 retrofit or something like that. But their thing is just, look, okay, we got these cars. This is the real world. We have real devices. Let's just ship the best model we can that runs within hardware 3, within hardware 4. And I don't think they've reached the limits of the inference computer yet, even on hardware 3, which is, kind of mind blowing. Like I was saying, I was just driving a 2020 car, more than 4-year-old car, and it drove just like my 2024 Model S and actually had better FSD than my Cybertruck.
Wild machine, choose whatever's in his mouth. Steamtorch says V12 is the first version I would recommend to a non-techie.
Yep, we're crossing the chasm from early adopter kind of tech science project to no, this is actually something that you don't want to drive without. And again, just going back to this 2020 car I'm driving, it's amazing how you can get one of these cars. There's probably a dirt cheap old Model 3 on the used market with FSD just pre-installed. And any ordinary person who's interested in this technology, you don't have to be rich. Any ordinary person can go and they can get a car with this and they can use it. That's kind of crazy to me.
Any questions, comments? Please request to speak. Omar, any updates on Ford Mach-E's, Ford Blue Cruise investigation?
Yeah, the NTSB has launched an investigation. The NTSB is an agency of the federal government that doesn't actually have any enforcement power. So they can't compel Ford to do anything in this crash or make any changes to their software. Ford actually did not even know about the crash because, unlike Tesla, they don't have the level of data and telemetry Tesla has where they get notified of any crash instantly and then they notify NHTSA. Instead, it was the cops who actually alerted Ford and they said, hey, okay, there was a crash. Somebody ended up dying who the Ford car hit. And the driver of the car told me that, or they told the police that they were using Blue Cruise hands free, kind of not really paying attention. And the car in front of them had no lights on and it was stopped in the lane in the middle of the highway. So clearly a breakdown situation or something like that. I don't think you can blame Ford fully. Although, if it had been able to see the car, that person would have been alive today. So, I think they do have some blame. I don't know how autopilot would have handled that situation, hopefully better. But the NTSB is investigating because this is a thing that could happen. Someone's car could break down, and we need to know that if someone's car breaks down on the highway, they're not going to get killed if somebody's using an ADAS system. So they're going to have a preliminary report out within 30 days, or I guess 27 days now. So within about a month, we should have their preliminary report on what happened.
Thank you. I pinned at the top Yashu's post, and you retweeted. Catwood said, "We are hearing multiple rumbling. We are hearing rumbling in different cities that they are starting to get ready for robotaxis." On a Bloomberg interview. What do you make of this comment?
I think that probably what they're going to do first is just file for a state permit from Arizona or California, which would allow them to operate driverless vehicles and maybe put out a couple test vehicles or something, maybe, driving around their campus or driving around Palo Alto or whatever, and just begin sort of testing it out. It'll be interesting to see kind of what their go to market strategy is, if they want to do some type of Waymo like service where they control the cars, or um, whether they let ordinary people put their cars on. I think that seems more advanced. But it's at the stage where I think probably, in 2025, we could see them start to file for some of these permits and begin testing the unsupervised FSD. You've noticed Elon has, in some of his recent tweets, made a distinction between supervised FSD and unsupervised FSD. So unsupervised FSD is, what some people would call like a level 4 system. There's essentially no human watching it. So it's the same software underneath. So the same exact software driving the car, but it can be in supervised mode, which means nag on, cabin camera on, or unsupervised mode, which just means that the nag is off, the cabin camera's off, and someone doesn't even need to be in the car. So they're going to start working on the unsupervised mode, make that work. Unsupervised mode's a little different. You can't just beep at the user and ask him to take over. You need to have a plan. So, instead of asking them to take over, you need to maybe pull over or something like that. So there's some different strategies around that before they can, start to trial it. And if it trials well, maybe they start giving some rides to see how it performs. If that works well, then they could start working on actually making it a functionality that that customers can use once the reliability of the software, of course, exceeds a human level of performance.
Machine.
Kathy Wood's mostly full of it, so I wouldn't really trust her. It doesn't mean I don't doubt that they're making some preparations to do these things in the next few years. but I wouldn't trust anything she says. And by the way, did you see this rumor about this like Korean investor saying he talked to team members of
Right.
FSD? I don't know if you mentioned that before, saying that they expect it to reach human level by this summer. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's definitely an interesting rumor.
Yeah, I mean, let's not get overexcited here. Let's see what actually happens.
So, Machine, are you saying that you wouldn't trust Cathy Wood, but you would trust an analyst that you've never seen before?
I didn't say I trusted that person either. I'm just saying that's interesting. I don't trust them either. They're probably making it up, and even if they weren't making it up, I'm interested how this team member would come up with that prediction if they were just looking at their scaling laws paper for Tesla so far and said, "Oh, this is the rate of error improvement so far. Let me continue the line straight down and to the right," and then made that prediction. So I don't know. There's a bunch of holes there.
Christian?
Oh, hi. Many thanks for letting me ask a question. I had a question on Omar, really quickly, just as far as what you posted yesterday, asking people to subscribe to FSD or buy it because that would convince Wall Street that this is, there's value to be assigned to this. How would, just to understand your thinking, how would Wall Street really know that? Because none of this data is reported by Tesla officially, so they would never actually get wind of it. Question one. And then question two, in terms of FSD's capabilities, let's say it gets to the point where it's better than a human unsupervised. That would still signal, lots and lots of accidents that Tesla would be liable for. So wouldn't it have to be, 100 times better than a human driver before this could be deployed as a level 4 system? Thanks.
So, number one, let's say FSD crosses 500,000 users, 1 million users. Tesla's going to tell us. In the past, they have told us that they have 400,000 users. They regularly disclose the number of miles. They love disclosing information as long as it's good. It's only more recently, when the users haven't been growing much, that they haven't been disclosing it. But if there's good news, they're not going to keep it a secret. Now, in terms of the safety level required, I mean, this is really going to be something that's decided jurisdiction by jurisdiction. But if you have something that's even, let's say, a little bit safer, right? So let's say you have a town where human drivers are and 500 people die. And with the cars driving, only, 499 people die. I think you can make an argument that you still reduce the number of deaths by one. And you keep grinding down, you keep reducing that. You make it better every year. A human driver makes the same mistake every time. Somebody drives drunk, they kill somebody. That same guy might go drive drunk again. Or even if he doesn't, a new teenager will get their license and they'll drive drunk. The problems can never be fixed. With autonomy, you fix the problem and then it doesn't happen again. You just keep grinding down on it. And you go to an insurance company. The insurance company obviously understands the risk. They give you a premium that's appropriate, and you just continue, driving the risk down over time. So I think probably it will actually be 10 times better than a human. But if it's twice as good as a human, you're honestly leading to unnecessary loss of life if you are already twice as good as a human and you wait to 10x to deploy it.
Yeah, but
As a reminder to first-time speakers, you must stay on mute and raise your hand and wait to be called upon. Thanks, Omar. Matt Sanko noted in YouTube live chat that NTSB indicates Blue Cruise-equipped Mustang Mach-E struck the rear of a Honda CRV that was stationary on Highway 10 in San Antonio, Texas. The CRV driver labeled died.
Yeah, so basically, they went and sponsored Jerry Rigs Everything on the day this news came out. So imagine you're this guy, Ford goes, hey, okay, $50,000 to sponsor your YouTube channel or whatever. And you go, oh, okay, great. Seems easy, video about Ford Mustang. Who knows? They probably didn't even tell him about the crash. Then you go put out your video. That day, it turns out Ford Mustang Mach-E with Blue Cruise, hands-free, drove into somebody and killed them. And then that same week, FSD Beta 12 is rolling out. And here you are, pumping Blue Cruise. It's pretty horrible timing.
Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. Volkswagen deepens collaboration with Mobileye, according to a press release that was published today. Volkswagen and Mobileye bring new automated driving functions to series production. Mobileye provides technologies based on Mobileye Supervision and Mobileye Chauffeur platforms. Audi, Bentley, Lamborghini, Porsche will use these series developments to rapidly bring new premium-oriented driving functions to their model portfolios. Mobileye is set to supply further technology components for autonomous driving to Volkswagen commercial vehicles. Omar, what do you think?
Yeah, so this is an interesting move. Mobileye has been working with Volkswagen for some time. They previously announced that Porsche would be using their new supervision system. So now they're expanding that partnership. The supervision system won't just be used in Porsche vehicles, but across Volkswagen's, very large portfolio, including passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles. So I think this is probably good for them. Their strategy seems a little confused. They're still trying to say their ADAS is going to be developed by their Cariad organization, which is kind of a complete disaster of an organization. Deese got fired for it. So their strategy still seems a little confused, but given their proven inability to develop any ADAS by themselves, going with Mobileye kind of makes sense. The thing is, Mobileye is no longer the shining star that it once was. With these recent advancements in AI, Mobileye has not really kept up with the times. They're not at the caliber that certainly Tesla is with their end-to-end approach. They've come out and said, the end-to-end approach is wrong. It's not the way forward. Don't do this. We actually need to let every car company write their own planning and control layer. And they came out at CES and said this. It's like, what? I think everybody who's tried V12 and the end-to-end framework, you just look at the reaction. Probably a lot of people would agree it's the only way forward. So I don't think Mobileye is ever going to be able to achieve generalized autonomy using their current framework. So we'll have to see when they admit that. But if I were Volkswagen and I really wanted to be a serious player in autonomy to sort of like compete and develop our own thing with Cariad, I'd be putting the NVIDIA car computer in my car. That's really, if you want to compete with Tesla, there's nothing else except the NVIDIA car computer, because that's what Tesla was using before they started developing their own car computers. And obviously, NVIDIA has released several new generations since then. So if you want to seriously launch features that have the inference compute power a Tesla has, you're going to want the NVIDIA car computer. And going with Mobileye might have been a good choice a few years ago, but these days they're not looking all that cutting edge to me, honestly. They're kind of not too much of a serious player anymore in my eyes. they still sell a ton of their IQ ADAS systems for, $53 a pop to, tons and tons of vehicles. But they don't seem to be doing a great job at transitioning from that legacy business of sort of lane keeping assist into higher levels of autonomy. And I think that's worrying. And their parent company, Intel, is not doing all that hot either. They were also once a glorious company, but they don't seem to be managed quite well. And that makes me question whether they can make sure Mobileye has good management too.
Actually,
All I know is if Mobileye continues to support a lot of OEMs, then this is going to be a real problem for leftists in Western culture, because basically they're going to have to choose between Elon Musk company or an Israeli company, and the uneducated left are going to hate both options. So sucks to be them.
or
Just a quick question about the rollout of FSD outside of the UK, outside of the US. I've been following it for a while and the progress of it. If and when it does roll out, say for argument's sake, in the UK, how long do you think it would take to be at a standard 12.3 is in the US now? Is that weeks, months? Does it take years of training?
Yeah, good question. One of the things that I've noticed from the feedback on V12 here in the United States is that there seemed to be a big performance differential between many areas of the country. Here in California, even V11 worked pretty well. But depending on where you were in the country, it could have a number of issues. And I think that really stemmed from the 300,000 lines of planning and control code they deleted, which when you're writing code manually in C++, it's very hard to create something that's dynamic enough to adapt to all the variety in the world. It's often hard for these programmers to even imagine some of the scenarios that are common across the country that they don't really see in their neighborhoods. So, one thing I've heard from people across the country is V12 just generalizes much better to different areas of the country. Even if you're outside California, it works really well. And I expect that to be the case with expanding it internationally too. The main reason they haven't expanded it internationally, and it's actually worked internationally for a number of years. You saw, for example, those Ukrainian hackers get FSD data working on in Ukraine even long before the war started. So it's had the capability to drive anywhere in the world for quite some time, but they haven't really wanted to have the headache of maintaining those 300,000 lines of manually written code for all these different countries. So with V12, you don't need to actually adapt the code. All you need to do in theory is just make sure you have some clips from these different countries, these different scenarios. And in theory, the same model should be able to work and do everything V12 does in the United States, in the UK, or in Europe, or in Asia, or in Australia, or anywhere. So I'm hoping that by the end of the year, we see at least a few more countries launched. The V12 architecture should make that much easier, but we'll kind of have to see. I think once everything looks good in North America, they're feature complete in North America, they'll then shift their focus to other markets as well. And the other good news is that on the regulatory side, there does seem to be some progress in Europe towards updating the regulations to allow for something like this.
thanks so much, Peter.
All right. Hang on, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
Whoops. Uh,
Are you at a cash register?
no. I just about work out my my house.
Just
Go
come back.
to.
Just come back when you're done. Just come back when you're done. That's
All right.
fine. In YouTube Live, Matt Sanko says Tesla looks at accident data and simulates a safe response to prevent the outcome. I bet your weights and biases change based on geolocation. I don't know. Don't know about that. Let's see. What else do we have to talk about? We talked about price adjustments. We talked about
Yeah, and
the
They're
Fed.
making over 1.4 million 4680 cells a week.
Oh yeah, that too. But before that, Peter.
Yeah,
Peter?
if I could, I want to say thank you for Yarman for you, like a space. I was listening almost every day, and I really get a lot of information. I appreciate it. I guess three Tesla, Model X, Model Y, Model 3. I get three full self-driving package on three car. One I pay for 8,000, one I pay for 12,000. I think one, I get two of them I pay $8,000 for. Anyway, I only have one get a 12.3 on Sunday. I was driving them. I was so impressed. I want to share this excitement to the space people. Before I hear you guys talking space, Homer are saying, "Oh, David," you feel like you get shocked. You get completely blow out. I was driving from I pick up my mom from her house to Irvine, drive her back on the freeway, on the local, zero innovation. And it was so smooth. I guess in the past 3 days, I almost feels like I'm living in my dream. Everywhere I go, I turn on 12+3, and I start to feel like the time I driving, I can't really do anything. So I became lazy. I started looking around the house on the roadside more, looking for the sky, and I feels like I was cars driving, I sitting on the car, I'm started dreaming for the future. I feels like in next 2-3 years something dramatically will change our life. And this thing we've been talking 8 years. Finally, it was here. That's all I want to share with people. That's it.
Thank you, Peter. And thanks for the kind words. Jonas?
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Go ahead.
Great. Nice to hear some old clubhouse voices again. It's been a long time. So I have a question for Omar, actually. You were talking about the inference computer before and the hitting the limits on it, and seeing as they now released Grok as an open source model with a very good timing to compete with OpenAI again, or yeah, and Figure One, of course. So, do you see that they will be able to have a quantized Grok running on this FSD computer as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you can bet that for hardware 5, it's one of the main use cases they're designing for. So you can have a 7 billion parameter version of Grok or something run on hardware 3, hardware 4. You can I don't think you would necessarily want to, except necessarily in the case of a connection failure. So I would think you'd probably have a local model as a fallback, and you probably call out to the server for most requests and use the full size model, but have a smaller version of the model that can give you some good answers or control aspects of your car or the robot when you have a failed connection. So that's going to be a superior architecture, I think, to OpenAI and Figure. I imagine that OpenAI is not going to give the model weights to Figure, to or even a quantized version to inference locally on the bot. They're going to have to go out over the internet, and therefore, if the internet connection has a problem or the server's down, then you're kind of just screwed. But this sort of hybrid model where you're calling out to a server but can also inference the model locally, I think will be much more resilient.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you have to have it localized to be able to actually do all the use cases they want to do with it eventually. But do you also see that do they actually have any type of data lead on the Optimus side? I mean, that's a big discussion right now as well. Are they actually able to have that data lead they have with the FSD with their bots in the future? Of course, Tesla will be able to produce them faster than anyone else, but how will they be distributing them? Who would they actually be distributing them to gain that data advantage over, for example, NVIDIA?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, you could say that they maybe don't have so much of a huge data lead yet. They certainly have a lead in, obviously, they've got a training infrastructure built up, they've got an evaluation infrastructure built up. They do have a lot of data of driving. So this data can also be helpful to the robot in some senses. It can sort of give it some understanding of the world. Originally, they just had the robot walking outside because they trained it using a lot of the vehicle data. But now a lot of the data they're collecting is really just sort of a lot of motion capture where they have someone wear sort of a VR rig and they record their actions and then try and train the bot end to end using human examples. So they would really need to scale this up. I think they certainly have the capital to scale it up, probably more than many of these startups. You saw all those humanoids on NVIDIA's stage at the GTC keynote this week. So a lot of people are trying to make a humanoid robot, but to sort of capture all those examples, it just costs money. The other aspect in it is mass production. And this is where I think Tesla could really pull ahead if they're able to leverage their expertise in mass manufacturing and actually able to make many of these things faster than others and collect the data and gather it back and maybe have some teleoperated data, maybe allow the users to teleoperate it to help generate some of that training data, just like we start by driving our Teslas manually. Then they can start to, I think, have a pretty large and sustained data lead, assuming they can actually get this into production and get this out there faster than other players. So, not necessarily safe to assume that, but given their expertise in manufacturing millions of cars, there is reason to think that they could outperform some of these startups that have no expertise in manufacturing. I mean, you look at Figure, for example, their founders were basically kicked out of the last company, Archer Aviation, which never got a product onto the market. Zero revenue. It was supposed to be a flying car. So what team are you going to bet on? The team that actually made millions of electric cars and changed the auto market, or the team that couldn't even get their product onto the market?
If that was an actual question or a rhetorical one, I don't know. But if it's an actual question, there's no doubt where my money is going. That's for sure. But seeing as they are good at manufacturing and they are mass producing like crazy when they actually set their mind to it, but they would have to reach quite high numbers for the backend system to be valuable on the data collection as well, right? It wouldn't be enough to just have 10,000. I mean, 10,000, even the competition can produce. The bots are not going to be as expensive as a car, and they can force out 10,000 of them. But Tesla would
Well,
need what, 100K
so
to.
I think it's going to be fairly easy to get the robot to perform the task sometimes. So, you just pay some people, you generate 1,000 examples or something, or 10,000 examples of a task being performed, and you can start to get a pretty good data set to do the task. And it's going to succeed sometimes, or maybe even most of the time. But in order to actually sell the product, it's like a self driving car. It needs to work every time, right? Because if I'm a factory, if I'm, let's say, operating a car factory or a textile factory or any kind of factory, and I want to have a robot in there to assist. So the robot can assist and be supervised by a human, but then it's not really reducing cost. It's maybe making the human's job easier. If I really want to replace a human, it actually needs to do it perfectly every time to be economically valuable. So that part, it really requires a lot of data. You need just sort of variations, not just the common cases, but okay, somebody pushed the robot. There was an earthquake, the power went out in the middle of the operation. All these sorts of scenarios it needs to be able to recognize or understand. So I think that's really sort of the challenging part. But it's getting easier in some ways to generate synthetic training data to help with this type of thing, but there's really no replacement for the resiliency you get with actually trying to operate in the real world. The real world and the customer's environment is always really weird. And anyone can make robot hardware. Anyone can make some primitive robot software that works sometimes. But the market winner here is going to be the robot that's as natural as a human, that doesn't make any mistakes, that's less clumsy than your brother or sister, right? And can just perform the task every time. I can say, hey, robot, can you go grab me a glass of water? And I know that I can ask it to grab me a water 3 times a day, 1,000 times a year, and it's not going to break that glass once. It's not going to drop that glass once. It's just going to bring it to me every time. No matter where it is, no matter whether I have some Amazon boxes in my living room, no matter whether my toddler's running around and left some Hot Wheels that it could slip on, it sees the Hot Wheel, it doesn't step on it, it doesn't fall down. Like that's really how good it needs to be. And I think much like cars, just having a lot of these things out there is going to be really important to be able to get to that level of variety in the training set.
Let's hope that's the next beta version we get to test then eventually, I guess. Our own Optimus bots.
Yeah, that would be
Thanks.
fun.
Thanks, Charles. Omar, any comments finally on 4680 production?
So, we remember that Reuters story where they said they had enough cell capacity for about 25,000 Cybertrucks a year. Um, they have a goal of 250,000 units of installed capacity. So they need to ramp up 4680 production roughly 10x from when that article came out. It sounds like they've roughly doubled the output of the factory, which is encouraging. Um, I don't think I expected them to be that far along, but essentially they've got cell capacity to produce, I guess, about 52,000 Cybertrucks a year, which is about a fifth of their target capacity. So they need to scale up cell production by 5 times more. So good progress, but still quite a ways ahead, quite a bit of work ahead of them. Especially if we want to produce 1 million units a year, of course, you could always put different battery chemistries in there. But if you wanted to produce millions of units a year of 4680 cars, then they have to scale up, 20 times the current output. So they're going to be building in Nevada as well and other facilities. They've got partners who are also going to be adding some cells. But, TLDR, good progress, still a long way to go.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. I got a question yesterday from Brandon, who asked, what was the last official comment we had on dry battery electrode? Do you remember when that was?
Hmm. They've talked about it a little bit here and there, um, on some unofficial channels or something maybe, but my understanding is the dry battery electrode process is working and they're using it in the current cyber cells that are going into the cars. I kind of remember seeing something about them buying some like traditional cathodes from China or something like that. So it's unclear if that was just temporary or they were having some issue or something. But my understanding is that the dry battery electrode is actually being used, the dry process is being used in Texas. And I think it's actually been one of the primary challenges in increasing the speed of the ramp. According to the Reuters article, that was sort of one of the problems they were having when they tried to turn it up faster. They were having some issues with it, so they needed to kind of rework some of the processes to keep, something from melting or something like that. So it's been very challenging to take the dry battery electrode's been working kind of on a benchtop for quite some time. but there's a big difference between getting something working in a lab and actually producing 1 million cells a week or 10 million cells a week using that technology. So they're really having to invent the process here, but it's working, which I think is huge, right? If you can actually make this work, and it appears that they are getting it to work, and I've been driving around with the Cybertruck. It's great. It's like any other Tesla battery. You wouldn't even know the difference. It has actually some great capabilities. Like the amount of charge you can get in 15 minutes of supercharging is just unbelievable. I had some really short charging trips when I took the Cybertruck, which kind of surprised me. So I think it's a very impressive pack. The power that can come out of it, everything, and if they can get the dry battery electrode process very streamlined and working at volume, then the capex required to put up a new cell line is a fraction of what it was. The time required to produce the cell is also slashed because the drying is a big time consuming process. It takes a lot of space, it takes a lot of energy. So, this is a huge breakthrough that they've been working a long time for. It may be a little premature to declare victory yet at, 52,000 cars a year worth of cell supply, but as they get up to you know, a quarter million, half a million, 1 million, this is going to have a big difference. They'll be able to make all their vehicles qualify for the IRA credits and be able to do it very easily and have, I think great vehicles with industry leading range. I mean, why has BYD been so dominant? In part, it's because of that deep level of vertical integration. They were a battery company. So I think they will obviously continue to buy from other suppliers, but there's something very special about the Cybertruck and having cells made by Tesla all under one roof with this sort of breakthrough process. It is a little bit under discussed and underappreciated compared to the significance. I mean, you look at these IRA credits, $45 per kilowatt hour potentially for these batteries that they make in the US. If they can ramp up production of 4680, I mean, it's almost as significant to their business as FSD.
Great summary. Thank you. Any questions, comments, please request to speak. If you'd like to support the space, you can do so with the link at the top of your screens on Patreon. Any questions, please request to speak.
Yeah, making battery cells is extremely difficult. It's not like software where you can just say, okay, it's got a bug in it, we'll fix it with an over the air update. This is chemistry. It happens at a very different pace of change. I mean, the lithium ion cells we use today are really not that different from the original lithium ion cells decades ago. So, not a lot of people are really trying new things, and it's very risky. You look at what happened with the Chevy Bolt. Nobody wants that kind of scenario where it just leaves a black mark on your brand forever. So it's a very, very challenging thing to do. And, you really got to give a lot of credit to the team at Giga Texas. A lot of people said they'd never be able to reach even this level of volume for cell production.
Thank you, Omar. Christian, I know you have a follow-up question. You requested to speak like 5 times, but when you come off the speaker board, you must stay on mute. So the rule applies to everybody. You can't cut off the other speaker. If you're okay with that, you can go ahead. Christian, you're on mute.
Oh, hi. Thanks. If you can hear me, I did have two quick follow-ups, or actually one point, one follow-up question. First point was in regards to the data that Tesla occasionally publishes when it's convenient on the number of cars in North America that have FSD. I think what would really convince Wall Street would be, data every quarter consistently, providing this kind of insight, not when it's convenient. That's the sort of trust building
Yeah, hey,
measure I think would help.
why don't you just, you seem to have a lot of ideas. Why don't you just apply for the CEO position at the company and see if you get it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think disclosure would be good, especially if the numbers are good. You share them, you're disclosing them regularly. Then Wall Street can kind of start to see this story. I think it's been a little bit early before V12 to really look at this stuff. But now that it's out, and this is, I think, the future of their business, they should start disclosing some numbers to tell that story. And I think it's going to be a crazy growth story. I mean, we're looking at really a $1 to $3 billion business in 2023 that I see growing literally 1,000 times larger on the top line within the next 10 years.
As a tuk tuk.
Yeah, I hope you guys can hear me. I just wanted to get Omar's thoughts on Chuck Cook's opinion that the current hardware 3 is not capable of level 4 and 5. He said in a recent video with, I believe, Fazad, that the B pillar cameras are way too back to ever go into, level 4 or level 5.
Well, I disagree with him. He's been saying this for a long time. When he first had his unprotected left turn, he said, "Oh my God, it can't make this unprotected left because of the camera placement." Well, guess what? They did a bunch of software updates and it started doing that unprotected left. So it turns out the hardware wasn't really the issue, the software just sucked. And I think we're seeing more and more, especially with V12, the software is capable of a lot more than we think it's capable of. And, um, it really highlights the power of the hardware. I mean, the hardware is just designed to mimic what we see, right? So we look out the front of the car. So there's cameras on the front of the car. We look out the side window. So the camera's there by the side window. We look from our uh, side view mirrors when we're changing our lanes. So there's a camera there too. And we sometimes look to the rear with the rear view mirror. So there's a rear camera. So you just put cameras where humans look. It may not be perfect. They can continue to adjust it, and they have for hardware 3 and 4 and 5. But you make do with what you have. And you can actually do it even if, let's say there was some place where the car couldn't see very well because of the angle of the road and the placement of the camera. First of all, these cameras just pop right off. They're like Legos. You just take the camera, pop, put a new one in there. It's super easy. So if they needed to make some adjustment to the camera, they could. They haven't. And you just see V12 making all these zero intervention drives. People are saying, okay, I had a zero intervention drive on V12. So if you're having zero intervention drives right now, why can't you have zero intervention drives in the future? If there's really some areas where it's challenging, it can't go, then you just don't go there. Simple as that. That's what Waymo and Cruise and others have done. If something's challenging, they just don't go there. So let's say you come up to an intersection and it's really hard to see. It's really hard to make a left, right? So the car goes, okay, I can't really see and I can't make this left comfortably. Let me just make a right. And it just makes a right and it turns around, right? That's all you have to do. And maybe you can, be a little more daring when you have a human in the car, if they have the controls or something. But there's ways to sort of work around it. Just because you can't handle, one intersection or something like that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. The other thing that's going to come in the future that's already starting to be built today is that the cars are all going to talk to each other over the internet. So they're going to have their own perception. If the internet goes down or whatever, then they're only going to rely on their own perception. But they're actually all going to be communicating with each other and letting each other know what they're seeing. So other Teslas will tell you that there are cars approaching, where they are, how fast they're going. You'll have a lot of that information in real time. If there's a construction zone, one Tesla sees the construction, it'll let you know. It'll let you know what lane the construction is in, what speed the street is going, what color the traffic lights are they on? Are they blinking? Everything you would need to know. And your car will be able to access that information over the internet, and it'll be able to plan using that too. So I think, you know, especially with V12, I think there's probably more people now than ever who believe that these hardware 3 cars and hardware 4 cars are going to be able to be driverless without any hardware changes. And if hardware changes are required, they're designed so that the computer's removable, the cameras are removable, and you can make minor changes. But everything we're seeing from people's drives are suggesting that there aren't really any hardware limitations. The limitations are almost all entirely software. And you look at Comma, for example, they're driving with even less hardware. They don't even have cameras around the car. They just have 3 cameras in the sort of dash mounted unit, and they're able to drive pretty well just with that. Tesla actually, removed radar, removed ultrasonic, and got better. So, I can see why Chuck Cook thinks that. People tend to think very hardware based, especially for him as somebody who's served in our military, he's been in the Air Force. I can see kind of why he'd think that way. And, he understands software pretty well too. But I think people generally underestimate how much better the software can be. And V12 really shows that, I think.
Thanks, Omar. One last question, and then we'll wrap it up. What do you think the valuation of Tesla would be if Tesla turns over robotaxis tomorrow?
Hmm. Well, to definitely be above $1 trillion.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will talk to you all tomorrow. Thanks, Omar. Take care, everybody. Chat tomorrow.